A chill ran down her spine. Who was this man, really? And what had she just stumbled into? Her pulse quickened as she watched the exchange unfold. The stranger hesitated before finally taking the envelope, his jaw tight, his fingers gripping the edges as if it carried a weight far heavier than paper. The man in the dark coat said something else, something sharp, urgent, then turned and disappeared into the night, leaving the stranger sitting there, frozen in place. She couldn't ignore the feeling twisting in her gut. Stepping forward, she called out, "Hey, are you okay?" The man's head snapped up, his eyes widening with surprise. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to leave, but then he exhaled, shoulders dropping. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said quietly. She hesitated. "Who are you?" He glanced down at the envelope, then back at her. "Just someone who understands what it's like to lose everything." He sighed, as if debating whether to say more. "That note I left you. Someone once left me one just like it when I needed it most. It saved me." She swallowed hard, realizing the truth. This wasn't just about her. This was about him too. Whatever was in that envelope, whatever his past held, it didn't change what he had done for her. Then, just as she was about to respond, he stood, placed the envelope beside her, and smiled. "Maybe it's your turn now." Confused, she reached for it, her hands trembling as she lifted the flap. Inside was a thick stack of cash and another note. Asterisk, "For a fresh start. Don't give up." Asterisk. Tears blurred her vision as she looked up, but he was already walking away, disappearing into the night just as quickly as he had arrived. She stood there, gripping the envelope, her breath shaky as reality sank in. This wasn't just kindness, it was life-changing. The weight she had carried for so long, the sleepless nights, the fear of losing everything. Suddenly, there was hope. She looked down at the note again, running her fingers over the words. Asterisk, "Don't give up," asterisk, the same message he had once received, passed down to her like a lifeline. Whoever he was, whatever he had been through, he understood. And now he had given her the chance to start over, just as someone had done for him. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but this time they weren't from pain, they were from something else. Gratitude, relief, a new beginning. She took a deep breath, clutching the note close to her heart. Then, with a small, hopeful smile, she stepped back inside the diner, ready to write the next chapter of her life. Every head turned. It was Sarah, one of the senior employees, someone who rarely spoke up in meetings. She folded her arms and looked directly at Mr. Thompson, her expression unreadable. The tension, already thick, grew heavier. A few other employees straightened in their chairs, as if suddenly realizing that this wasn't just Marcus's fight. Mr. Thompson let out a forced laugh. Asterisk, "Come on, guys. Don't be so sensitive." Asterisk, but this time his voice wavered. He could see it now, the shift in the room. What had started as a careless remark had turned into something he couldn't control. Then, another voice spoke up. Asterisk, "I think we all deserve an explanation," asterisk, said Daniel, one of the newer employees. More murmurs followed. Marcus glanced around and saw it clearly now. People weren't just uncomfortable. They were angry. For the first time, Mr. Thompson looked unsure. He had expected silence. Instead, he had started something he wasn't prepared to finish. And Marcus, he was just getting started. Mr. Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his usual confidence slipping away. He opened his mouth, but for the first time, no words came out. The weight of the room had turned against him. What had started as a careless remark was now something he couldn't dismiss. Marcus took a step forward, his voice steady but firm. Asterisk, "You say it was just a joke, but let me ask you this. Would you have said it to anyone else in this room? Or was it meant just for me?" Asterisk. Silence. No excuses, no nervous laughter, just silence. Mr. Thompson looked around, realizing that not a single person was on his side. His authority, once unquestioned, was slipping through his fingers. And then the unexpected happened. The door swung open. and the regional director, Mr. Hayes, stepped inside. He had been scheduled to join the meeting later, but from the look on his face, he had heard enough. Asterisk, Mr. Thompson, my office. Now. Asterisk, his voice was sharp, leaving no room for argument. The color drained from Mr. Thompson's face. Without another word, he stood and walked out, his usual arrogance gone. As the door closed behind them, a slow realization settled over the room. The power had shifted, not just in that moment, but in the entire workplace. Marcus hadn't just stood up for himself, he had changed the conversation. And as he sat back down, the eyes of his coworkers weren't just filled with shock, they were filled with respect. The moment Mr. Thompson walked out, the tension in the room seemed to lift. People exchanged glances, some still in shock, others quietly nodding at Marcus. No one had expected the meeting to take this turn, but deep down, they knew something like this had been building for a long time. Marcus exhaled slowly and sat back down. He hadn't planned for any of this to happen, but he also knew he couldn't have stayed silent. A few employees murmured words of support, and Sarah gave him a small, approving nod. Later that day, word spread that Mr. Thompson had been placed on immediate leave pending an investigation. No one knew what would happen next, but one thing was clear: things would never be the same. As Marcus packed up his things, he felt something new in the office: respect, change, and a quiet understanding that silence was no longer an option.